Sarah sat quietly in seat 13F, just another passenger on Flight 447. Nobody knew she was Colonel Falcon Mitchell, a legendary fighter pilot. When hijackers attacked and F-22 jets arrived to help, the pilots heard her famous call sign over the radio. Everything changed in that moment. Before watching full story, comment below from where you watching. Also like and subscribe for more stories. The morning sun cast long shadows across Denver International Airport as passengers hurried through the bustling terminal. Among them, Sarah Mitchell moved with quiet efficiency, her navy blazer and jeans making her indistinguishable from the hundreds of other travelers. At 35, she carried herself with an understated confidence that most people attributed to professional success rather than combat experience. The only hint of her military background was a simple but precise watch on her wrist, standard issue though few would recognize it. Gate B-23 buzzed with the familiar energy of a morning departure. Sarah found a seat near the boarding area and opened a paperback novel, settling into the practiced art of blending in. She had mastered this civilian camouflage over years of wanting nothing more than a peaceful flight without curious strangers asking about her work or probing into stories she couldn't, and wouldn't, tell. United Flight 447 to Seattle, now boarding all passengers, announced the gate agent over the PA system. Sarah closed her book, collected her modest carry-on and joined the boarding queue. The ritual was familiar and comforting in its normalcy. No one paid her any special attention, which was exactly how she preferred it. Settling into seat 13F, Sarah found herself between Harold Winston, a chatty businessman in his 60s, and Jenny Parks, a college student barely out of her teens. Both seemed eager for conversation as the aircraft filled with passengers. Business or pleasure? Harold asked with the practiced ease of a frequent traveler. A little of both, Sarah replied with a polite smile. You? Sales conference in Seattle. 23 years I've been doing this route. Harold pulled out his laptop case with practiced efficiency. What line of work are you in? Sarah had rehearsed this answer countless times. Government consulting. Pretty boring stuff, really? Jenny looked up from her phone, earbuds dangling around her neck. I'm Jenny, by the way. Senior at CU Boulder, going home to see my parents. Are you from Seattle originally? No, just visiting friends. I'm Sarah. The conversation flowed naturally, covering the usual topics that strangers discuss on airplanes: weather, travel plans, the general pleasantries that make long flights bearable. As flight attendants began their safety demonstration, Sarah listened with the intense focus that had been drilled into her during years of military service. Her eyes automatically cataloged emergency exits, noted the location of safety equipment, and assessed potential escape routes. It was an ingrained habit she couldn't shake, even on civilian flights. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Reynolds, came the voice over the intercom. We're expecting a smooth flight today to Seattle with clear skies and a flight time of 2 hours and 15 minutes. Flight attendants, please prepare for departure. The Boeing 737 pushed back from the gate and taxied toward the runway. Sarah watched Denver's skyline shrink through her window as they climbed toward cruising altitude. The Rocky Mountains stretched endlessly below, their snow-capped peaks catching the morning light. You know, Harold said, opening his laptop as the seatbelt sign chimed off, I was in the Air Force myself. Back in the 80s. Never flew fighters though, just transport. Always wondered what it would be like up in one of those F-16s. Sarah's attention sharpened almost imperceptibly, though she maintained her casual demeanor. Must have been interesting work. Oh yeah, different world back then. These days the technology they have, those F-22 Raptors, F-35s. Incredible machines. Harold shook his head in amazement. My nephew's in the Air Force now, actually. Says the pilots who fly those things are like something out of a movie. Superhuman reflexes, years of training. He calls them the best of the best. Jenny chimed in from the aisle seat. My brother wanted to be a pilot, but his vision wasn't good enough. He ended up in IT instead. Still dreams about flying jets though. Ever been on a military base? Harold asked Sarah. They do tours sometimes. Really impressive to see those aircraft up close. Once or twice, Sarah replied carefully. Very impressive, as you said. She deflected smoothly, returning her attention to her book. Harold, taking the hint, focused on his spreadsheets. The conversation settled into comfortable silence as the aircraft leveled off at 30,000 feet. 200 miles away, in the depths of Cheyenne Mountain, Technical Sergeant Martinez stared at his radar display with growing concern. The NORAD Operations Center hummed with quiet efficiency, multiple screens displaying air traffic patterns across North America. Something was wrong. NORAD control, we have an anomalous radar signature approximately 200 miles northwest of Denver, Martinez reported into his headset. Possible drone incursion near restricted airspace. Colonel Harris, the duty officer, moved to Martinez's station. Classification: unknown aircraft, low altitude, not responding to identification requests. Pattern suggests possible surveillance or reconnaissance mission. Martinez highlighted the target on his screen. It's moving toward commercial air corridors. Alert Buckley Air Force Base, Harris ordered. Scramble 2 F-22s for intercept and identification. This could be nothing, but we don't take chances. At Buckley Air Force Base, the alert klaxon shattered the morning quiet. Major Jack Viper Thompson and Captain Lisa Steele Rodriguez sprinted toward their aircraft, already running through pre-flight checklists in their heads. Within minutes, 2 F-22 Raptors thundered down the runway, afterburners blazing against the Colorado sky. Viper 2, this is Viper 1, Thompson radioed as they climbed steeply toward intercept altitude. We're airborne and proceeding to intercept coordinates. Stay sharp, we don't know what we're dealing with. Copy, Viper 1, Rodriguez responded from the second aircraft. Radar contact established. Bogey bearing 270, Angels 15. Back aboard Flight 447, the routine of air travel continued. Jenny noticed something first, pressing her face to the window with curiosity rather than alarm. Is it normal to see military jets up here? Sarah followed her gaze and spotted two contrails streaking across the distant sky. Her trained eye immediately recognized the flight pattern. Interceptor aircraft closing on a target. But she kept her voice calm and reassuring. Sometimes they do training exercises. Nothing to worry about. Harold leaned across to look out the window. Probably just routine patrol. Post 9/11 they keep a close eye on everything up here. My nephew mentioned they run intercepts all the time, mostly false alarms. Sarah nodded agreement, but her expression grew more alert. Something about the aircraft movements suggested this wasn't routine training. The F-22s were flying an intercept pattern she recognized from her own combat missions. Purposeful, urgent, real. In the lead Raptor, Major Thompson established visual contact with the unknown aircraft. NORAD control, Viper 1 has visual on unknown aircraft. Appears to be commercial drone, possibly modified for extended range surveillance. Copy, Viper 1. Identify and assess threat level. Viper 1, Captain Rodriguez called from the second aircraft. I'm detecting electronic emissions from the bogey. Could be jamming or surveillance equipment. NORAD control, Thompson's voice carried new urgency. Recommend immediate commercial air traffic rerouting. This could be hostile reconnaissance. The order came swiftly from Denver Air Traffic Control, United 447, Denver Center. We need you to alter course to heading 090 and begin descent to flight level 300. In Flight 447's cockpit, Captain Reynolds and First Officer Patel exchanged concerned glances. Denver Center, United 447. Requesting reason for course deviation. United 447 military exercise in your vicinity. This is for traffic separation only. Military exercise? Patel muttered. That's unusual for this area. Passengers began to notice the aircraft banking and descending. Sarah felt the change immediately, the subtle shift in engine tone, the gentle pressure as the aircraft turned. Her civilian facade remained intact, but every military instinct was now fully engaged. Why are we turning? Jenny asked, a note of concern creeping into her voice. Flight attendant Karen walked past, maintaining professional calm. Just a small course correction, folks. Nothing to be concerned about. Sarah unbuckled her seatbelt and caught Karen's attention. Excuse me, I couldn't help but notice we're descending and changing course. Is everything all right? The pilots haven't told us anything specific, Karen replied quietly. Probably just air traffic control routing, but I'll check with the cockpit if you'd like. Sarah nodded and returned to her seat, though her demeanor had shifted subtly. Harold noticed the change. You look worried. Everything okay? Just, the timing of this course change with those military aircraft we saw earlier. Could be coincidence, but... Harold studied her face. You seem to know more about this stuff than most people. Before Sarah could respond, passengers throughout the cabin began pointing out windows. The F-22 Raptors had moved into escort positions, their sleek forms clearly visible in the morning sunlight. Are those fighter jets? One passenger called out. Why are they so close to us? Another asked nervously. A murmur of concern spread through the cabin like wildfire. Sarah studied the aircraft positions through her window. Perfect formation flying, textbook escort protocol. These pilots knew exactly what they were doing. Flight attendant Karen's voice came over the intercom, carefully controlled. "Ladies and gentlemen, please remain calm. We're being escorted by Air Force aircraft as a precautionary measure. There is no immediate danger to our flight." Jenny grabbed Sarah's arm. "This isn't normal, is it? Fighter jets don't just escort passenger planes for fun." Sarah's response was measured and reassuring. "Military escorts are actually very professional when they're needed. Those pilots know exactly what they're doing. We're probably safer now than we were 5 minutes ago." Harold was studying Sarah more intently now. "You really do seem to know about this stuff. Government consulting, you said?" I've read about it," Sarah replied, but she could see Harold wasn't entirely convinced by her deflection. In the lead F-22, Major Thompson's situation was escalating rapidly. Denver Center, Viper 1. Unknown aircraft is now actively jamming commercial frequencies. Repeat, we have confirmed hostile electronic warfare activity. The response was immediate. All aircraft. Emergency protocols now in effect. Unknown aircraft conducting electronic warfare operations in Sector 7. Captain Reynolds felt his blood run cold as warning lights illuminated across his instrument panel. Radio static filled the cockpit, drowning out attempts to communicate with air traffic control. "We're losing radio contact," he told his first officer. "Backup frequencies are being jammed too." "Should we declare emergency?" Patel asked. "Can't get through to anyone. We're on our own until this interference clears." The aircraft shuddered slightly as it encountered turbulence from the F-22's jet wash. Passengers were growing increasingly anxious, sensing that something significant was happening even if they didn't understand what. "What's going on?" demanded a passenger from across the aisle. "Why can't the pilots talk to the ground?" Flight attendants moved through the cabin trying to maintain calm, but uncertainty was beginning to show in their faces. The situation was clearly beyond normal procedures. Harold turned to Sarah again. "You've been remarkably calm through all this. That's not typical for a government consultant, is it?" Sarah realized her composure under pressure was starting to make her stand out. Years of combat had trained her to remain cool in crisis situations, but that training was now drawing unwanted attention. "I just try not to panic," she said carefully. "Getting upset won't change anything, and those military pilots escorting us are highly trained professionals." "How do you know so much about military procedures?" Jenny pressed. "I mean, you talk about fighter pilots like you know them personally." Before Sarah could formulate another deflection, flight attendant Karen approached her seat with an expression of barely controlled anxiety. "Excuse me, ma'am? The captain would like to speak with you in the cockpit if possible." The request sent a ripple of confusion through nearby passengers. Harold voiced what everyone was thinking. Her? Why her specifically? Sarah stood quickly, her mind racing. "I'm sure it's just routine." But as she followed Karen toward the cockpit, she knew her carefully maintained cover was about to be blown. The question was whether she could help resolve this crisis without revealing more about her background than absolutely necessary. Captain Reynolds looked up as she entered the cramped cockpit. His face showed the strain of dealing with a situation spiraling beyond his control. "Ma'am, I understand you have some government background? We're in a situation here where we can't communicate with air traffic control, and these F-22s are obviously here for a very serious reason." Sarah assessed the situation quickly. Instrument warnings, radio static, and 2 of the Air Force's most advanced fighters maintaining close escort. This was no training exercise. "What exactly do you need from me, Captain?" "Honestly? Someone who understands what's happening. Our radios are being jammed, we have military escort, and my passengers are starting to panic. I need to know if you have any insight into military protocols." Sarah hesitated. Once she revealed her true background, there would be no going back to anonymity. But lives might depend on establishing communication with the F-22s. "Captain, I may be able to help. But I need you to patch me into any frequency you can establish with those F-22s." First Officer Patel looked at her suspiciously. "Who are you exactly?" Sarah met his gaze steadily. "Someone who speaks their language." In the lead Raptor, Major Thompson was watching the unknown aircraft accelerate toward the commercial airliner. Whatever its mission, the endgame was approaching. "Viper 1, bogey is accelerating toward the commercial aircraft," Captain Rodriguez radioed. "Whatever it's planning, it's happening now. United 447, United 447, This is Air Force Viper 1 on emergency frequency 121.5. Do you copy? Captain Reynolds grabbed his microphone. Viper 1, this is United 447. We copy you 5 by 5. United 447, we have a hostile aircraft using electronic warfare against civilian aviation. We need you to follow our lead for an emergency descent and evasive maneuvers. Reynolds looked at Sarah, who nodded encouragingly. The situation was critical, and standard procedures weren't going to be enough. Viper 1 understood. United 447 ready to comply with your instructions. Sarah reached for the radio, knowing that what she was about to do would change everything. Captain, may I? Reynolds hesitated only a moment before handing over the microphone. Go ahead. Sarah keyed the mic and spoke words she hadn't used in civilian airspace for years. Viper 1, this is Falcon. The response was immediate and electric. Major Thompson's voice carried unmistakable shock. Say again, United 447? Viper 1, this is Colonel Sarah Mitchell, call sign Falcon. I'm aboard United 447 as a passenger. In the second F-22, Captain Rodriguez nearly lost control of her aircraft. Viper 1, did she just say Falcon? The Falcon. Thompson's voice came back filled with awe and professional respect. Falcon, this is Major Jack Thompson, call sign Viper. Ma'am, if you're who I think you are, it's an honor to be flying with you today. Sarah felt the familiar rush of command authority returning. Viper 1, what's our tactical situation? Falcon, we have a hostile drone conducting electronic warfare, approximately 2 miles from your position and closing. It appears to be targeting civilian aircraft with jamming equipment, possibly for surveillance or attack purposes. Copy, Viper 1. Recommend we get this civilian aircraft clear of the engagement zone. Can you provide escort to alternate landing site? Affirmative, Falcon. We can escort you to Peterson Air Force Base, approximately 15 minutes flight time. Captain Reynolds and First Officer Patel stared at Sarah in amazement. The professional terminology, the calm authority, the obvious respect from the fighter pilots. This was clearly no ordinary government consultant. Viper 1, Sarah continued, I'm going to coordinate with the civilian crew for emergency procedures. Maintain escort and prepare to engage hostile if it continues approach. Roger, Falcon. It's really good to have you in the fight again, ma'am. Sarah felt a complex mix of emotions. For years, she had tried to leave this world behind, to find peace in civilian life. But hearing those words, good to have you in the fight again, reminded her why she had loved flying, why she had dedicated her life to protecting others. She turned to Captain Reynolds, who was staring at her with new understanding. Captain, I need to explain some things to you and your passengers. But first, we need to prepare for evasive maneuvers. Word of the radio exchange had somehow filtered back into the passenger cabin. Harold was watching Sarah's empty seat with growing realization, and Jenny was asking questions that flight attendants couldn't answer. Did anyone else hear what she called herself on the radio? Harold asked the passengers around him. It sounded like Falcon. An elderly gentleman across the aisle, wearing a military veteran's cap, looked up sharply. Falcon? As in Colonel Sarah Mitchell? The Falcon? You know that name? Harold asked. Know it? Son, every military aviation enthusiast knows that call sign. She's a legend. Shot down 6 enemy aircraft in Operation Desert Lightning, saved an entire carrier group by taking out surface-to-air missile sites single-handedly. They say she can fly an F-22 like it's an extension of her own body. Jenny's eyes widened. The quiet woman in 13F is a war hero? If that's really her, the veteran said, then we're in the hands of one of the finest combat pilots this country has ever produced. In the cockpit, Sarah was coordinating with the F-22s for the flight to Peterson Air Force Base. The hostile drone had been engaged and neutralized, but the electronic warfare attack had demonstrated serious vulnerabilities in civilian aviation security. Viper 1, this is Falcon. Civilian aircraft is secure and ready for escort to Peterson. Copy, Falcon. Permission to request something? Go ahead, Viper 1. Ma'am, on behalf of every pilot in the Air Force, we'd like to render an aerial salute. Your service record, your heroism in combat, it's inspired all of us. Sarah was quiet for a moment, touched by the gesture. Viper 1, that would be an honor. As Flight 447 began its descent toward Peterson Air Force Base, the 2 F-22 Raptors moved into ceremonial formation. Major Thompson and Captain Rodriguez executed a precision aerial salute, a maneuver reserved for only the most distinguished military aviators. Passengers pressed against windows to watch the dramatic display. The sleek fighters moved in perfect synchronization, a tribute to military aviation excellence that few civilians ever witness. Harold was shaking his head in amazement. She was sitting right there next to us and we had no idea. A decorated war hero, and she was just reading a novel like any other passenger. Jenny was equally stunned. She seemed so normal, so quiet. I never would have guessed she was famous. The elderly veteran smiled knowingly. That's exactly the kind of person she is. True heroes don't need to announce themselves. They just do their job and try to live normal lives afterward. As the aircraft touched down at Peterson Air Force Base, Sarah prepared to face the media attention and recognition she had spent years trying to avoid. But as she looked out at the F-22s still escorting them to the gate, she felt a sense of pride and purpose she hadn't experienced in civilian life. The quiet woman in seat 13F was indeed Falcon, one of the Air Force's most legendary pilots, whose courage and skill had saved countless lives. And on this day at 30,000 feet, her identity had been revealed not through boastfulness or self-promotion, but through her natural instinct to protect others when danger threatened. The passengers of United Flight 447 would never forget the day they discovered that heroes really do walk among us, often hiding in plain sight, ready to answer the call when their country and their fellow citizens need them most. Sarah Mitchell had tried to leave her military life behind, but when crisis struck at altitude, the call sign Falcon had returned to active duty one more time, with all the honor, respect, and legendary skill that name represented throughout the United States Air Force.